views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight's guest is a current Bronx Assembly member and also was recently elected to be a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, which puts him right in the center of the national dialogue on issues like immigration and health care, as well as political dialogue over the state of the Democratic Party. So we have a range of issues to talk with him about, both national, we can do some local. Please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk Assemblyman Michael Blake. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you, Gary.
Always great to have you,
Definitely,
sir.
definitely.
And it's hard to find you because you're kind of got a larger scope than you've had. Before we even talk about some of those issues that I brought up, why was it important to you to become the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee? Some people may not be aware. This wasn't just a thing, well, we nominate Michael and Michael, everybody show of hands. You had to run a campaign, you had to convince people all over the country. Why did you do that?
Well, obviously, first and foremost, with it being this week, our thoughts are always reflecting on 9/11, which we reflect on that 16 years later. We wanted to be able to help not just here in the Bronx, but across the country. When we don't have the White House, being the Democratic Party, we have elections. And so this was an election for a 4-year term. 447 people have the honor around the world to be members of the Democratic National Committee. On February 25th, we were part of that election. And so, 9 of us were elected as officers on that day, 5 vice chairs from around the country, Grace Meng being one of them out of Queens. And now we can be really focused. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to be focused on building the bench. I wanted to say, how do we make sure that we're getting more young people to be a part of running for office and being candidates themselves, as well as campaign managers and finance directors and communications directors, et cetera. I wanted to be a part of making sure millennials were engaged, making sure that we're not just talking to communities of color and women every 4 years, but every 4 weeks. And so the reality
If not
is,
every 4 days, if I can interject.
Look, if you do it, that's the way it should be. It should be a continual relationship, right? And so, I wanted to be a part of an entity to help transform what's happening within our party. And there's obviously opportunities happening here in New York, which we're very engaged in across the state. But also across the country, there's a lot of opportunities as well. And grateful that the members of the DNC have given me an opportunity to represent the national party for the next 4 years.
You mentioned 9/11. Of course, this week is the 16th anniversary of 9/11. Let's talk about America since that fateful day. I think in many ways it was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener about who we are. It was a sense of nationalism. Are we closer now to roping in the terrorist threat, to feeling like we're a little more secure than we were? I mean, looking back on that day, we were incredibly vulnerable, even though we hadn't realized it. What's your assessment of what we've done in the 16 years since that horrible day?
Well, we've certainly made progress. We have to make sure that we never forget the impact of the close to 3,000 lives that were lost on that day, the lives that have been impacted past that day. I vividly remember, Gary, where I was at. I was sitting in my house here in the Bronx, over by University in Burnside, where one of my friends called me, Jason Brown, who was in college 2 years ahead of me. He said, "We're under attack." And you don't really process that until you watch it and you see it.
Especially because we had not been in that situation since Pearl Harbor, essentially.
You're not reflecting on that being a possibility in that manner. And so, clearly we've made progress. We're much more in tune to what's happening as it relates to our national security. We're much more in tune as it relates to international affairs. We're very much more engaged as it relates to who's getting on planes, who's not getting on planes, and being aware of that element. But we have to be in tune all of the time. Look, the reality is, our national security is the priority of anyone who's commander-in-chief, anyone's administration. You know, I had the opportunity for close to 3 years serving in the administration of President Obama nationally, and first and foremost, he was always reminding all of us, our job is to protect people, first and foremost. Let's be clear about that. So we've made progress, but obviously as we watch what's happening around the world, what's happening in our country, what happens in our cities, we can never be too vigilant to make sure that our communities are safe.
The notion of fear has been used by the current administration to change really the very nature of American immigration policies. We know that the president has asked to remove DACA and take that whole notion off the table. There was talk today that the temporary protected status for 400,000 Americans was now being considered to be withdrawn. Is this the kind of thing that we need to do to continue to keep America safe?
Absolutely not. So let's first be clear. Donald Trump is a racist, sexist, misogynistic demagogue who has discriminatory policies to try to impact our communities across the country. And we can't be silent about that. We need to be clear about that and direct about that. When you push forward an unconstitutional Muslim ban, when you move forward on rescinding DACA and saying, you know what, we're going to have 6 months and then we'll revisit it, you're demonstrating yet again that you are not standing in terms of empowering all of our communities and coming together. What we need right now is not a president who's tweeting. We need a president that's leading. And when you see that he was able to stand on the side of white supremacists but wouldn't stand on the side of all communities at all times, that's why we should be concerned about that. Let's be very clear. DACA, those that are impacted by DACA, we're talking about people that are nurses. We're talking about people that serve in our military. We're talking about individuals that are a part of our fabric as a community, as a country. As a son of immigrants, my family's from Jamaica, as I've mentioned many times before. It is reprehensible that we would ever be in a space where we'd be pushing back against those that are in our community. So what do we need to do? Number one, we need to be very clear about making sure we're taking stands on comprehensive immigration reform and making sure we're creating opportunities for communities to be able to stay here. Number two, we should not ever be in a scenario where we're sending people back to countries that may not be their own. Why? What if you never grew up there? You don't know the communities there. What if you're going back to a community where there's violence? What if you're an individual that's LGBTQ and you're going back to a community that's much more conservative? We have to be cognizant of the scenarios we're creating in that manner. And so it is not making us safer by the policies putting forward at all. And so we have to be clear about that. We have to be continual about that. And we have to make sure at the end of the day, our responsibility is to help everyone. You know, look, the reality is unless someone is Native American, we all came here in different aspects. And so the reality that we're not going to be welcoming is absolutely unacceptable. And it's something that we will not stand for, not just as a Democratic Party. It's not something we should stand for as Americans.
Despite your strong words and your passion for this, it's very clear. You've made it very clear of what you think of the current president and administration. There are many people who have latched on to his rhetoric, his ideas, the idea that immigrants and others have come to this country and are taking something from Americans, are taking jobs away from Americans, are taking opportunities away from, I guess, other than Native Americans, but people who are citizens. And so they are saying, you know what, people like Michael Blake who say that are the people who are actually ruining America, because this is what's essentially sucked the blood and the life out of America. What's your response to
They're
that?
fundamentally wrong. So people like myself and people like others that care about inclusivity, what do we care about? We care about creating jobs for all of our respective communities. We care about making sure that we're not dividing our communities based upon race, skin color, sexual orientation, geography. We say something regularly that your zip code should not deny your destiny, your block should not block your blessing. The reality is if we're in our communities, we should be standing up for all of our communities all of the time. Let's make sure we're processing this. For individuals that voted for Donald Trump, he said to you that we would build a wall that Mexico would pay for. Not happening. He said that we would repeal health care in the first day. Not happening. He said we would do all these things that actually would impact your life and create opportunities that are simply not happening. The creation of jobs. There were more jobs created under President Obama in the last 6 months of the Obama administration than the first 6 months of Donald Trump. The same data that Donald Trump now wants to celebrate is the exact same data that he was denigrating when President Obama was in office. So we talk about what's happening here. We want to make sure we're all making progress. We want to make sure we're all standing up in a very comprehensive way. And our vision that we talk through in the Democratic Party is a better deal. How are we giving someone a better deal? We don't want to just say Trump is bad, which he is. I want to be very clear about that. We want to say, well, we're good. We want to say that when we focus on what's happening for young people, that we're going to stand up to make sure you can actually pay for your student loans, as opposed to the Trump administration that has not said they will continue the federal student loan repayment program. We're going to say to women that I don't just have to be a woman to stand up for women's rights. I'm a man, I'm also a feminist. And when you have someone that's saying things that are celebrating sexual assault, we absolutely reject that. When you see language that's coming out of Betsy DeVos that's essentially saying that victims of sexual assault, that they're not going to have protections around them, we reject that. So all these pieces are things that we're coming around and saying we're going to stand up for. And we have to be very clear. At the end of the day, when individuals are saying, you know what, we support policies that would lead to communities not being here. We support policies that will not stand up for criminal justice reform. We support policies that are not standing up for all opportunities that are available for all of us. That is not America. That is not our communities. The Bronx, Gary, as you know this, we're the most diverse county in America. The census has now ranked us as this. So how could we be a county and a community where we celebrate diversity, but then all of a sudden we're being selective about that?
Obviously, you believe you're right, and there are many people who do.
Well, I think most of the country believes
Well,
that. The reality is, close to 59%.
This is really what I want to get to. Yes. Yet, the entire federal government is technically controlled by Republicans who would reject what you're saying.
And they've done fundamentally nothing.
Why didn't that message communicate to a point, certainly where Hillary Clinton would have been elected, or even, maybe add more Democratic senators, so that, frankly, you wouldn't be in kind of the second place fight that you're in right now?
Well, let's look at the numbers. Hillary Clinton received more votes than Donald Trump. We can never ignore that. The reality is Donald Trump is president right now, more than likely because 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, approximately 72,000 votes, broke his way, where you have states where Donald Trump and his entities and supporters were adamantly supportive of voter suppression, were adamantly supportive of amplifying rhetoric that was leading to a reduced vote that was there. However, simultaneously, it is our job to communicate to people why they should vote for us. And so, we want to be very clear. You want to talk about health care? Let's talk about health care. Let's talk about that we do not believe that 23 million people should lose their health care. We believe that you should have free colonoscopies, free mammograms, that you should be able to stay on your parents' plan until age 26. We want to talk about jobs? Let's talk about jobs. Let's talk about how there needs to be opportunities. Donald Trump has not said that they would continue the Minority Business Development Agency. What would that mean to small businesses and minority businesses and women-owned businesses in the Bronx and throughout the state of New York that don't have those opportunities? That doesn't exist. So this is an opportunity for us to make that turn. And, something I always remind people, Gary, is that, look, you look at what happened in 2000, for example. Lost the presidential election. President Obama at that time was running for Congress. He lost his election. The same year he was trying to go to the Democratic convention, he only had credentials for 2 days. He left because he was out of frustration. 4 years later, the same convention he couldn't attend for multiple days, he was the keynote speaker. 2 years later, we were taking back Congress. 2 years later, 45 years to the day of Dr. King giving I Have a Dream speech, Barack Obama is becoming the Democratic nominee. Things happen when we stay diligent. And this is an opportunity to be very clear with people. There is a clear choice that you have. A Democratic vision that is helping to advance what's happening in our communities, as opposed to the Trump, Pence, Ryan, McConnell vision that has taken a step back.
So you interviewed on CNN, and essentially the line of questioning was very similar. In essence, what can the Democrats actually do right now to change the course of things, which right now, I have to tell you, you turn on TV, you don't see Democrats on TV talking about some of these issues. You're going to see them on BronxTalk because that's who our elected officials are. But you don't see it in a national way. You don't see. You'll see Chuck Schumer, maybe. You may see. Congresswoman Pelosi, maybe. But you're not seeing the kind of national dialogue taken away from the Republicans. They are commanding the national dialogue.
I would respectfully disagree. Let's be clear about this. Pelosi and Schumer are the reasons that we have responsible progress happening in terms of paying for our federal government to continue. We weren't seeing a very clear plan that was coming out of Republicans. We look at what happened with health care. If it wasn't for Democrats being united on that, and then of course great leaders such as Collins and Murkowski and Senator McCain stepping up and saying we're not going to repeal health care without a plan, then otherwise what would have happened? We would have had 22 million people without health care. And so we have to be clear and communicating regularly. Things are happening. It is difficult, as you know, to have continual progress when you don't have power in Senate or in Congress or in the White House. However, we have to be diligent and very clear. But we want to be clear also about this. At the end of the day, you have to communicate to people on the ground, why does this matter? When people ask, well, why does it matter what's going on with Russia and the elections that are happening? It's because you have entities that have communicated that they are impacting state voting systems. Now, they might not have changed voting tallies, but if they're impacting what's happening on the rolls, that should concern you. When we talk about what's happening on a national level as it relates to DACA, you can't tell me that the Latino community and the Caribbean community and the West African community doesn't care about what's happening as it relates to what's going on with DACA. So things that are happening on a national level have impact on the local level every single day. You talk about the budget, Gary, the impact that happens in that aspect. When you talk about how senior centers are wondering what's going to happen for Meals on Wheels, that has actual impact on the ground. So our response is let's rise and organize. That's what we say as a Democratic Party. That has been our vision and our mantra. Rise and organize. Let's get people engaged. Let's get people motivated. Let's get people to be knocking on doors now. And as you can see, a data point to demonstrate that progress, as of this point today, there are more individuals that have registered with the Federal Election Commission to run as Democrats in Congress than the last 3 midterms combined at this point. You look at Emily's list, which shows what's happening with women that are running for office across the country. Usually at this point, about 900 individuals that women have signed up. There are more than 10,000 that have done so. You look at what has happened around, give or take around Labor Day and activities that are happening around the country. We were able to have mobilizations that happened on there to continue what we had for Resistance Summer in mid-August, where we had 212 activations happen around the country. People are ready. They're ready in New Jersey to get that governor's seat back. They're ready in Virginia to get the governor, the LG, and the AG seat back. They're ready here in New York, where we have major seats and major elections that are happening. People are ready to get motivated, and that's what we're seeing from the Democratic Party.
There seems to be an internal fight in the Democratic Party with progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. There are many frustrated Democrats who said, you know what, the Democratic National Committee was heavy-handed about trying to get Hillary Clinton to get the nomination, and that was as unfair as anything that you could protest against in terms of a political process. And there are, I think I read a piece, and of course it's hard to know what the truth is behind what you read, but there seems to be a very strong movement to say to Bernie Sanders, you know what, come into the umbrella of the Democratic National Committee, because the more you split away, the more you're taking progressives out of the kind of efforts that you're talking about. Does that concern you about having that kind of fractionalism in the Democratic Party?
Not one bit. Look, my family's Jamaican. We probably have conversations about if we're going to have oxtail or curry goat for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Like, the reality is, it's good to have those conversations because it makes you stronger. And the reality is, we have to make sure we're being comparable on both sides. The Republican Party has a pretty significant faction when you talk about what's going on, when you talk about what's going on with the Freedom Caucus and the Tea Party itself. So this is not new to have multiple entities that are a part of what's happening here. What we are seeing, though, is that mobilization is happening around the country of people wanting to get involved. Look at, again, let's start here locally. You have races across our state that are happening. You have races not just in the municipal level, you have races that are happening in the municipal level, not just in New York City, but also across the state, in Rochester, in Buffalo, in Albany, in Syracuse. People are mobilizing, they're getting involved, they're getting engaged. You see what's going on in Florida. You have Rick Kreisman that's running for re-election for Mayor of St. Petersburg, but also a major special election that's happening down there that can take the tilt in our direction. It's good to have this kind of energy. People want to be involved. That's a great thing. There's nothing bad about that. But what we want to do is make sure more people get involved. We want people to be signing up for New Leaders Council so they can learn about how they can be a young millennial, learn about progress and policy. We want people to learn about Emerge. We want them to understand about Flippable to help flip what's going on for these state legislative districts, or Indivisible, or Sister District, or Swing Left. All these great entities that are existing, the collective, all these different entities that are existing to get more people involved. That's what we want to see. And we talk about here locally, I never want to forget where I come from. I'm born and raised in the Bronx. We've seen these opportunities. We've seen these efforts that are happening. When we talk about building a better Bronx, it's not just about the policy success we've had from economic development, from education and equity. It's also the political success of getting more people to be engaged in the process that otherwise would not be engaged.
Would it make sense for the Democratic Party now to begin to identify people on a national scale, and you could pick Democratic senators, someone like Al Franken, for example, and start to position them in terms of their image to say, you know what, this person could be your next president, and let people start to visualize what it might look like to have that person be the president? Or is it too soon to start identifying people in that way?
Well, I don't think you should be identifying people for presidency per se, but I think you can identify the next generation of talent. The reality is, the Democratic National Committee and the members of such thought that a young son of Jamaican immigrants from the Bronx, New York, named Michael Alexander Blake should be one of their vice chairs. So the notion that we don't have young talent, we reject that. You look at Karen Carter Peterson in Louisiana, a state senator who was another one of our vice chairs for voter participation and civic engagement. She is phenomenal, fantastic, and brilliant. You look at Grace Meng, young Asian American woman leader out of Congress in Queens, phenomenal, fantastic, great leader in all that she's doing. You look at what's happening across the country, we're demonstrating that young leadership. The reality is it's easy sometimes to only focus on those that are a United States Senate. We respect that, I understand that, we get that. However, that does not mean you don't have talent. You look at the New York Yankees, right? I've been telling people this recently. You know, people talk about Aaron Judge and his more than 40 home runs. He has 41 home runs at this point. You know, he's a remarkable talent. But the reality is there's a lot of talent that exists with the Yankees. And the reason why they've been able to make progress is you could talk about Didi, you could talk about Starlin, you could talk about Gary Sanchez, because they built many people around. And so someone may only talk about one person, but that doesn't mean you don't have a team. And so the reality is in the exact same way when Jordan won those 6 titles and it was him and Pippen and BJ and everyone that was there. The reality is we want to think about that same way. We want to show you there is a team. There's a lot of great talent. You have Kim Fox in Chicago as Cook County. You have Steve Benjamin in South Carolina. You have Crisanta Duran, the first Latina speaker in the state of Colorado. The talent is there. It is now our responsibility to make sure we're elevating that talent so that people don't just see it in 2020, but also see it in 2018. Last thing on that point, we talk about that next level of talent. You have an opportunity in New Jersey with Sheila Oliver and in Virginia with Justin Fairfax to have 2 lieutenant governors that are lieutenant governors of color at the same time. It shows the opportunity that exists, that we're demonstrating. That bench is happening, and that's the building of the bench, and that's the new vision that we have. From the school board to the Senate, from the city council to Congress, all the way from the State House to the White House, that's the new vision of the Democratic Party.
Let's talk about Michael Alexander Blake then in that context. Many people in the Bronx, and certainly we are a local broadcast, are going to look and say, well, you know what? He's an assemblyman. He's spending a lot of his time and clearly his energies and his thoughts on a national scale. Is he still interested in being an assemblyman? Is he thinking maybe one day he'd run for Congress? Would you, for example, run for re-election? And then along with that, what about the district? And are you able to spend the kind of time and attention focusing on the 79th Assembly District, given your new position on a national scale?
I'm absolutely running for re-election. Let's be very clear about that. I am absolutely committed to the 79th Assembly District. And in the exact same way, we all multitask. You know, the reality is I don't hear people ever asking a single mom how they multitask on responsibilities. So the notion that someone can't multitask in serving the community and serving their country, we reject that. So let's talk about what we are doing. Our vision when we were elected and took office on December 15th of 2014 was focusing on the 3-2-1 vision, the 3 E's of economic development, education, and equality for all. We've changed equality for all to equity. What have we achieved? The American Entrepreneurship Award. We're the 2nd place in the country, Miami being the 1st, for a 10-year commitment, $500,000 to help entrepreneurs on the ground get access to capital. We've changed the law, a signature law that I was able to lead that has been signed into law, being the Prompt Pay Bill, so that businesses that contract with the state of New York under 300 employees get paid in 15 days instead of 30 days. We were able to take the lead on Raise the Age, along with Speaker Hasty and Assemblyman Joe Lenton and Assemblymember Jeff Aubrey, so that 16 and 17-year-olds are not tried as adults and getting the respect that they need and deserve. We're focusing on education through the My Brother's Keeper initiative, the first state in the country to have funding around My Brother's Keeper. We've been very focused on the ground. $3.4 million of renovations that are coming to NYCHA developments in the 79th District. Historic funding coming to our school districts 7 and 9 and 11 and 12 that wasn't happening before in the 79th District. Entrepreneurs and jobs being created that was not happening in the 79th District. We're very clear about our priority. My priority is home. I grew up at Creston and Burnside. I went to PS 79, 118 DeWitt Clinton. I came back home. I live in the district at 159th and 3rd Avenue. We're very clear about our responsibility to help here at home. However, let's be clear. This is an opportunity also to help serve our country. This is an opportunity to help transform the vision of what's happening in our country. And how could I be a young black man that has grown up here, that is a millennial, that has experienced issues that I have experienced, seen the opportunities that I have seen, had a chance to work for the President of the United States and Barack Obama for close to 7 years, came back home and not feel a commitment to go and help the community all across the country. We have to make sure that we stop trying to tell our young people in our communities, you know what, we want you to dream small. The first thing Barack Obama told me when I saw him in 2006 was, Michael, dream big dreams. We need to stop telling people in the Bronx to dream small dreams. That is not the vision that we will have. We will help people realize those dreams. We'll help people grow and manifest those dreams. And our vision is not making sure we're building a better Bronx, but also building a better Democratic Party.
Let's talk about the state assembly. There is a bill that apparently has passed the assembly and fell slightly short in the Senate about creating a single-payer health plan in the state of New York. As you look toward your next session, which I guess will begin in January, do you see that becoming reality, or is that yet something else that the Democrats will keep pushing for, just frankly in name only? Or do you think that is a potential reality for the state of New York?
Well, a lot of things that are possible and potential realities as it relates to what happens in the legislature are largely impacted by what happens in the state Senate. So let's make sure we do a very quick education to everyone. There are 150 assembly members in New York State. You have 63 senators in New York State. When you combine the numbers of the 23 mainline Democrats, the 8 members of the Independent Democratic Conference, the 1 individual in Simca Felder was a Democrat that's aligning with Republicans, that would be 32 out of 63 seats. What does that practically mean? If everyone came together, we would have the majority as a unified majority. What does that practically mean? The last time we had uniform and unity in that effort in the Senate, in the Assembly, and the governor, we were able to change Rockefeller drug laws. So, to your question, Gary, that means
about 40 seconds.
That means we can move forward on single payer. That means we can move forward and strengthen what's happened on Raise the Age. That means we could move forward on making sure we have more criminal justice reform. There are a lot of different efforts. Campaign fiscal equity. Our district is owed the most money in New York State. These policies will be significantly impacted, and that's why the race that happens in Suffolk County has great impact. Depending on if Phil Boyd resigns his seat and there's an opportunity to pick up that seat, we can then move forward and really make more progress in our district.
Assemblyman, maybe 10 seconds, just give me a final word or a message, mostly to people of the Bronx, about what they ought to be thinking about as regards our Democratic National Committee.
That we are the ones we've been waiting for. You know, Jim Wallace was very clear in telling us that we can't sit on the sidelines. And so if you want to be engaged in what we're doing, follow us on Twitter at The Democrats. Follow me on Twitter at Elmar Mike Blake. Come and visit our office. We're at 780 Concourse Village West. If you want to be engaged, don't sit on the sidelines. You can't just be quiet. We need you engaged now.
Assemblyman, you're never afraid to say what you think, and we on Bronx Talk appreciate that every single time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Always good to see you.
Always great. Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on the show tonight or anything going on in the Bronx, then send us an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You can tweet us at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out our archives at BronxNet.org, and we have a new website, so you'll be able to find all the Bronx Talk archives in there. And we want to just simply thank our producer, Lindsay, and our director, Brianna, and the cast of thousands, and the Assemblyman, and to you,